We like to call it the Supernatural Hour. And now, our hosts.
Hey, welcome to the Supernatural Hour. I'm Raven.
I'm Rogue.
I'm Chad.
Our main topic for today is Pazazu Algarad. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. This topic was actually sent to us by one of the listeners, and I believe it was a he. He said, you should consider this topic. And I thought, I have never heard of this before. And so I looked it up, and this is some creepy stuff.
He's a creepy dude.
The last time I got this big of creeps researching a podcast was when we did medieval torture devices, which was cool, but severely creepy. This is just creepy and severely creepy.
Yeah.
But it ties into a recent-ish podcast that we did, so I'm excited to talk about it and talk about that tie-in.
That relationship?
Yeah. So we'll give you the backstory first. Okay, there is a fruit fly. I've got fruit flies in my house. Not a ton, but just enough that there's always one there, but I cannot find what they're digging. You know when you've got fruit flies and you'll find a garbage can somewhere and there's like a cloud? I've never found ground zero. Anyway, sorry, squirrel. Okay, Pazazu. That's what it's like to live with me.
So what's a Pazazu?
It's not a what, well, I guess it is a what, but it's also a who. This Pazazu is a fellow, he was born John Alexander Lawson. He was born in 1978 in California. And we don't know a whole lot about his early life, but at some point, his parents got divorced. He and his mom relocated to Clemens, North Carolina.
And then his dad went back to California.
Mm-hmm. And he decided to change his name from John Alexander Lawson to Pazazu Algarad. And Algarad...
You can see the attraction.
Yes.
You can see the attraction to such a beautiful name.
So Pazazu is actually, the movie The Exorcist.
Yeah.
It is the name of an Assyrian demon that was in that movie. Played by Eileen Dietz. She was the actress that played it. He used to tell people that he had magical powers and he could control the weather. So why not name yourself after a demon?
Well, Don Decker kind of controlled the rain.
Well, he actually controlled the rain. This guy was just nuts. That was rude. I was rude. I was true. But I was rude. Here's an interesting thing. I'm learning Arabic. And al means like of the or the. And I thought Algarad, because he also will tell people, or he's dead now, but he would tell people that he was of Iranian descent, and apparently there's not an Iranian drop of blood in him at all. And
no, he looked pretty Nordic, blonde-haired, blue-eyed.
Yeah. So Algarad, I thought, I wonder if that's an Islamic thing, and I don't know if this is just coincidence. I don't know if Algarad meant something to him, but I typed it into my translator that I've got on my phone as closely as I could, because they don't really have a G. And it's Algarad, Algarad. They have a J sound. So I typed it in as closely as I could come up with. And Algarad means locusts in Arabic. Just FYI.
Ooh.
So Pazazu, Sumerian demon of the locusts.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much. So there's actually a
scary
dog.
bug.
Creepy bug. Bugs are pretty creepy. I've got fruit flies. It's creepy.
He just wants to be a scary bug.
So if he's very interesting looking. He's got a bunch of face tattoos, and he filed his teeth to be pointy. Filed them himself. He didn't go in and have implants put in, or he just got out a file and went to town in the bathroom one day, which just does not seem very healthy to me. But that's me. So there's a gal named Patricia Gillespie, and she produced a documentary which you can find on YouTube. It's called The Devil You Know. And she said it was one of the reasons we don't know much about his childhood. I mean, because his mother was around. He was around. We'll get to his demise eventually. But she said it was really hard to get a true grasp of what his life was like because he would reinvent stories about his childhood. Basically, he was a pathological liar. And so you never knew what was true and what wasn't. And as she said, he told people he was from Iraq. He told people his father was some high priest. But the people who knew him as a child described him as a little off-kilter, a little emotional, things that might indicate the beginning of a mental illness like harming animals, consuming alcohol and drugs at a very early age.
Yeah, he was like big time into alcohol by 13.
Yeah, he was actually diagnosed with the mental illnesses, schizophrenia, alcoholism, and agoraphobia. And I forgot to look that up, but isn't that a not wanting to hang around people?
No, I don't know. Fear of agors.
Oh, I can't take you anywhere. Okay, so we checked. Agoraphobia is an anxiety, paranoia, crowds, being around people, being in situations that might trigger anxiety.
New places, things like that.
Yep. So that's kind of what I thought, but I wasn't entirely sure. Now his mom's name was Cynthia, and she originally, when he was younger, and was noticing that maybe he was a little off, she actually got him some psychiatric help, and so he did, for quite some time, get some help and was doing really well. But eventually she ran out of money. She couldn't afford the treatment for him, so he stopped going to treatment. And apparently once he stopped going to treatment, his mental health deteriorated very quickly. Cynthia was interviewed for this YouTube documentary. It's actually The Devil You Know, Viceland. V-I-C-E, Viceland. So if you're interested, that's what you're going to find it. And what she being Cynthia, described in her interview as they were making this, she said he wasn't by any means an angel, but he wasn't a bad person or a boogeyman or whatever phrases people have called him. And I haven't watched this documentary. I want to because I think it would be interesting. But I'm sure that at one point he wasn't a boogeyman. I'm sure at one point, he was just struggling with this mental illness. But as soon as he stopped getting treatment for this, he turned into the boogeyman. He turned into a bad person. But I agree with her, and just the little bit that I've read, I think he just started out as, just having some issues. And here, when we've talked about serial killers on this podcast before, and we've always tried to tie in a paranormal experience, and usually you can find, a haunting story or some ghost story, a ghost sighting or something that ties into it. I couldn't find one for this one, but I did find our paranormal tie-in with this one. And again, if you remember listening to 2 podcasts ago when we talked about mental illness versus possession, a lot of people who knew him said that his change was very dramatic. It wasn't, something slow that happened over several years. They said, he went from just kind of a normal run-of-the-mill American kid that, had some issues to just almost overnight, the face tattoos and the real dramatic changes and heavy drinking and when we have talked before of possession, that's one of the signs of the second stage of possession, is just a very dramatic switch. Very dramatic change in behavior, very dramatic change in dress. And everyone's going to, especially in your teenage years, you're going to experiment with, preppy and experiment. I'm just going from my own experiments. Preppy to new wave. That doesn't age me at all.
Or goth.
I see teenagers and you can tell that they're experimenting. But this wasn't an experiment. This was I've been this way for a long time, and suddenly boom, I'm extremely, extremely different. There's a difference in that. So it was in 2002 that he changed his name to Pazazu Algarad, kind of an homage to the Assyrian demon referenced in The Exorcist, like we mentioned. But all these things kind of happened at the same time. Name change. And so to me, I'm going to say that he had some mental illness. And I think because of the mental illness, not only was he an easy target, but I think he also wanted it.
Yeah. We talked a little bit before about the different levels of possession. We said it's not something that happens to someone extremely quickly. There's a caveat on that, and that caveat is unless you want it to.
Right. And I think...
Are you inviting it in? I mean, being possessed, if you're resistant, can take an awful long time. If you're trying to shun it and stay away, it's not something that happens quickly. But if it's something that you are embracing and inviting in, that can happen very quickly.
Right. I consider this fellow to be a perfect storm. He had the mental illness, which is going to make you more open to it anyway. And then on top of that, the lifestyle he lived was an open invitation. I mean, he was a very prolific and, what's the word I'm looking for, obvious, proud Satan worshiper. When they went into his home...
Had it posted on the front of his house, didn't he?
Front of the
have
house.
Some sign on this front
Mm-hmm.
of the door.
And if you Google this, you can actually very easily find video. The sheriff's department videoed inside the house before they demolished it. And all over the wall, because he believed he was Iranian, he looked up some...
Arabic scripts.
Arabic words. I'm not going to say he learned Arabic. I don't think he had that kind of mental capacity. And I'm not saying, I'm so much better because I do, but he wasn't in the mindset of let's learn a foreign language. I think he just looked up a few words because you would see the same couple words over and over in the house.
Like spray painted on things and the walls.
And the one of the words that I saw several times was Ablis, which is the devil. And it was painted... I probably saw it in the video 6 or 7 times.
So describe what a good housekeeper he was.
So every once in a while, my mindset is if my house looked like an R.C. Willey showroom, which is a popular Utah furniture store, if you're not in Utah, if my house looked like an R.C. Willey showroom, my life would be happy. That being said, it does not. But it's not filthy. I mean, sometimes the dishes could be done a little more often, and sometimes maybe I could sweep one more time that week or something. But really, all in all, my home is pretty clean. And when I watch an episode of The Hoarders, it makes me realize that I'm doing a bang-up job. This house was pretty much an episode of The Hoarders. Broken glass on the floor, dead animals, feces.
Dead animals in cages and stuff.
Feces.
He was hoarding dead animals.
Yep. Ground into the floor. They found substances that they're pretty sure was blood.
On the walls.
On the walls.
Wasn't
on the
there
floor.
blood all over the walls?
Mm-hmm. It was gross. And the walls, the main decor in the house was all very satanic, very dark, very, very negative.
Yeah, you couldn't see the floor.
Didn't he have a girlfriend that lived there with him?
2 fiancés.
He had 2 fiancés.
Oh.
So one of the things
At the same time.
At the same time that we know of. Did he have more? We don't know.
And wasn't that his mother's house?
Yes.
Didn't his mother live there?
Yes. And as far as hygiene is concerned, so yeah, it was her home. People that knew him, like one of his psychiatrists, said that he bathed no more than once a year and hadn't brushed his teeth in years. And the reason for this, he claimed that personal hygiene stripped the body of its defenses in warding off infection and illnesses. So he thought any sort of hygiene was actually bad for you, when it's like, dude, it's just the opposite.
Well, cleanliness is next to godliness, and that's not where he wanted to go.
No.
Very true.
But, just going back to the house and just the state of the house and the things that were on the house. And it wasn't just confined to the inside. I mean, the front door had a like a picture of the devil on the front of it. In the back, I'm sure that at one time this home was quite nice because in the backyard there was a pool. And I know what you're thinking, pool, sparkly blue water. No, this pool was emptied, had mud in it. I mean, when I say emptied, it was, of chlorinated water. There may have been 6 inches of murky sludge from rain or whatever in it. But there was stuff spray painted on the back of the house. There was stuff spray painted on the walls of the pool. I mean, anybody with eyeballs that could see this home from any angle is going to see something satanic and dark on the home. And, just this behavior, his looks, his pointed teeth, his, he would tell people that he regularly made animal sacrifices, which I totally believe based on all the dead animals in the home and, the animal feces and, a lot of the blood they found in the home. We'll get to this in just a second, but some of it was animal blood. But just a major, major rebellion against the city and its residents, because this city is a very heavily Christian city, as are most cities in the southern U.S. I would say this is probably in the Bible Belt, and so he's just kicking against the pricks, I guess is what they would say. So he did other stuff besides just
Animal sacrifice
and making me feel good about my housekeeping skills. Going back to his 2 fiancées, not 1, but 2 fiancées, he really kind of is vaguely similar to Charles Manson.
In fact, he kind of patterned his group, or he wanted to pattern after Charles Manson.
Right. I mean, he did this kind of purposely. It was like his mentor in a way.
His family.
He has this strange charisma where he actually could draw others who felt socially excluded kind of into his circle. You're a social outcast. Oh, come, I shall take care of you. And he encouraged them to engage in debauchery. Sorry, I can't talk. Engage in debauchery. He had a friend by the name of Nate Anderson, and Nate told people, and I'm just going to read this, he had a twisted sort of charisma. It's the kind of charisma that isn't going to appeal to everyone, but certain minds are going to be drawn in by that. The misfits, the outcasts, people living on the edge, or people who wanted to live on the edge were drawn to him. And just his energy and his aura and just his off-kilter charisma. And Manson could attract women, and so could Algarad. So he had 2 fiancées, like we've mentioned before. Their names were Amber and Crystal. And his home, which was actually his mother's home, kind of became a hub for his
family.
For his family, for all these misfits that were drawn to him. And this is kind of, his hub of operation was his mother's home. So kind of the rules that he had were a lack of rules. They could come and stay as long as they wanted, and he did not care what they did in his home. So the mess that's in there can't be attributed just to him, but could be attributed to all of his followers, all of his family, all the people that came in. And they didn't care. It wasn't their home. So here's some of these activities. Self-harm, drinking the blood of birds, performing rabbit sacrifices, copious drug use, and staging orgies.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
Debauchery.
So eat, drink, and be merry. For tomorrow you'll die, I guess.
Orgies on feces with a dirty, gross person that hasn't bathed.
Yeah, doesn't that sound like a lot of fun?
None of this sounds fun at all, actually.
No. So it's interesting on the video that I found, at the sheriff's department. I mean, they can't handle the stench, and they go through the home and show you all the rooms in the home. Then they go outside, because this story gets even more interesting once we make it outside. But they're outside, and the cameraman says, to there's like 4 or 5 people that are, going through the home. The cameraman says, "Is that stench out here, or is it coming from inside the home?" It was so bad you couldn't tell where it was coming from. Because they'd been inside. They'd been inside for probably, the video that I watched was maybe 15 minutes. So they'd been in the home for probably 10 of those minutes. And they went outside, and he couldn't tell if the stench was outside stench or inside stench. That's how bad it had been. Yeah, so, it was dark. And by dark, I'm talking heavy dark. Because as you went in, it was well lit. But it was dark. And I could even feel the energy of, just the dark energy just watching the video. It was just like, ugh. Pazazu, besides just some self-harm and just giving himself over to demonic stuff, he was charged with accessory after the fact of involuntary manslaughter, because there's actually several deaths attributed to him, and by several, probably 3 or 4 that I can think of. Okay, so this was in October 2010 that he was charged with this. In September of 2010, the body of Joseph Emmerich Chandler was discovered in Yadkin County. And Pazazu was accused of concealing information from investigators and allowing the murder suspect to stay at his house, and knew that he was the murder suspect. If you don't know, I don't think you can be charged with accessory, but he knew. So 4 years later, so he's already kind of got this record on his head. October 5th, 2014, Pazazu, who's 35 years old at this time, and his fiancée, Amber, who was 24, they were both arrested because skeletal remains of 2 men were found buried in their backyard. So when they went outside in this video that I watched, they actually showed, the holes were still there. I don't know, maybe I just have a little bit more innocent mind than I think. But Chad and I really enjoy watching Forensic Files and Deadly Women and Lieutenant Joe Kenda. We like these. And one of the reasons why I like them is not because I like the people who are killed. It's terrible. I like watching how they catch these bad guys. I like watching, especially Forensic Files, to see how they catch them. They can do amazing things with forensics. It's amazing. So in this backyard, the holes where they found these remains were still open. They had big blue tarps with piles of dirt on them, so they can sift through and find bits and pieces. But I don't know, when you watch Forensic Files and they say, they killed this person and buried him in their backyard, and the smarts of my brain tell me this is not how it works. But I always imagine this very neat rectangle that's dug and then laid out flat.
You've bagpiped at way too many
right.
funerals.
With their little arms over their chests, clutching a flower. No, these were just little round holes that were just dug and they just stuffed them in. And I was like, oh, that's kind of a harsh reality for me. I don't know, maybe I just want these people to have been buried nicely after they've been
brutally killed by some psychopath.
Right? So I don't know, it was a little disturbing to me to see just this little, literally they walked out the door and dug a hole just right there and just stuffed them in. And I think they were dismembered.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were dismembered, so just parts and pieces were just thrown in these holes. And,
Yeah, that was part of the story, is they dismembered them.
So it was about a week later that these men were identified, and they were identified as Joshua Wetzler and Tommy Welch, and they actually had disappeared in 2009, so they'd been buried in the backyard for 5 years. So they arrested Pazazu. They arrested Amber, his fiancée, who was 24 years old. Well, his other fiancée, Crystal, was 28 years old. She was actually charged in connection with the death of one of the persons whose body was found. And then she was suspected of helping with the burial of Wetzler. And if I remember right, I don't have this in my notes, but I think he had killed one of them And he just sat in the house for like a week or two, and then he called Crystal and said, "Hey, what you doing? Come help me bury this body."
And hadn't at least one of these been kind of a friend previously?
I think they'd both been friends
I
previously.
mean, yeah, they kind of got on the outs for some reason, and so that was a reason enough to kill him.
Yep. So they think that Pazazu had killed Joshua in 2009, and Amber helped bury his body. And then apparently Amber had killed the other fellow a couple months later, and Pazazu had helped with that burial. They'd both been shot in the head. So I don't know. I mean, there's not a lot of information of...
Yeah, and I know at least one of them had been dismembered completely. You know, they'd cut off everything. I mean, arms, legs.
Every extremity.
Every extremity.
We won't name one of those, but anything that... Could project out. Project is a good word. I was going to use a different one. That one was better. Anyway, when they found the remains, and I don't know how police were... There were some details that were left out. Maybe I need to watch the documentary. I don't know how police were alerted to the fact that these bodies were buried in the backyard. But shortly after they found these bodies and exhumed the bodies, they deemed the home unfit for human habitation. And in April of 2015...
That could have been determined before they found the bodies with the way that house was.
I could have told you that.
Yeah.
Before they found the bodies. But at that point, they said, no, you guys are out. And I guess they had given Cynthia, the mother, a timeline to get it cleaned up, and they do this with all hoarder homes. If you've ever watched Hoarders, you've got to get it cleaned up by this time, or you've got to move, or, and she didn't make it, and they actually extended it for her. Because I don't get the impression that she had anything to do with anything. I think she was just the mom,
But she didn't do anything about it either.
Exactly. She didn't stop it. But you wonder,
She was complicit, not in, omission, but in just not taking care of it or
right.
Notifying authorities about what's going on.
Yeah, and I'm thinking
help.
if you've got a dead guy hanging out somewhere in your house, you'd say something to somebody. I don't know. It's just me. And they actually demolished the home. There's actually pictures. When I was trying to look for some sort of a ghost story, someone seeing an apparition or, hearing noises or something, I came across a photo. The neighbor actually purchased the home or the land. And in the picture, it's just, it's flat. Looks like he's seeding it with grass or something. And apparently the neighbors were very, very, very happy when it was gone. And I would have to agree.
Yeah.
If there's a home.
And it's a normal looking residential area. I mean, it was a rather normal middle class home. It wasn't no shack in some shabby little town, at least from the pictures that I had seen of it. It could
right.
be a house in your neighborhood or my neighborhood kind of a thing.
Right. I mean, it had a pool in the backyard, and pools aren't cheap. So at some point, it was quite a nice home. And I don't know if that was originally Cynthia's home. I'm assuming that she bought it since they moved from California. But at one point, it was a very, very nice home.
Yeah, it looked kind of like a brick rambler home that would have been built in the 60s, 70s.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, obviously, Algarad has gone to prison. But his story doesn't, just stop at prison. It was October 28th, 2015, he was found dead in his prison cell in Raleigh, North Carolina. The death was ruled a suicide. He bled to death as a result of a deep cut on his left arm. I think they said it was on the inside of his elbow. And the instrument which he cut himself is unknown. They kind of think that he used his teeth. And I am sorry.
That's what I read.
But that had to have hurt really bad. I will never kill myself that way.
With your file-sharpened teeth?
Because, ow. I'm a wuss. Ow. That would not happen. The autopsy revealed what the autopsy revealed, so let's try that again. The autopsy revealed that his death was due to excessive blood loss. There were a few things that they found in the cell, like an electric razor, a clear bottle of red fluid, but they couldn't find anything that
would be used to make that kind of
that
a
could have
wound.
made that kind of a cut, and so they figure it was his teeth. So 2 years later, in 2017, Amber, who was the fiance, pled guilty to second-degree murder, armed robbery, and accessory after the fact. So apparently she was the one that shot Tommy Welch, one of the fellows that they found buried outside. She shot him twice in the head with a .22 caliber rifle as he was just sitting on the couch. We don't know what he was doing, but there he sat, and she shot him. She was sentenced to a minimum of 30 years and 8 months in prison with a maximum of 39 years and 2 months. And then fiance 2, she pled guilty to conspiracy to accessory after the fact of first-degree murder on June 5th of 2017. She was sentenced to a minimum of 3 years and 2 months with a maximum of 4 years and 10 months. So, honestly, as creepy as that is, this would be, I think, an interesting place to investigate, just with the heavy, heavy energy there.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff going on.
Yep.
And for quite a while. It wasn't just a few weeks or months. It was multiple years.
Right. And then just to throw back again to, the discussion we had a couple podcasts ago about, the mental illness versus paranormal. And I think he had it all. And it would be interesting, to know what kind of stuff paranormal-wise was happening in their home. Where you're inviting that and you're living a lifestyle that invites that in. Were they hearing voices? Were they seeing things? Were they able to actually see some of these spirits? Were they, and not that I'm jealous, I don't want to hear or see anything like that, but it would be interesting to know kind of what went down behind those closed doors. But part of me also doesn't want to know what went down behind those closed doors, because what I do know is creepy enough. So,
yeah.
Stay spooky, my haunty friends.
I love you, Nicholas.
Hey, have a good night.
My ears hurt.
You've been listening to the Supernatural Hour at AdvancedParanormal.com. The Supernatural Hour is part of the Radio Ronin network, found at RadioRonin.com. Copyright 2021 by Advanced Paranormal Services.